Okay, here is the article. WTC emergency head was building collapse specialist. And boy, that is only the tip of the iceberg there. It is far more serious than that. And here's the individual, Jerome Hauer, the former New York City Chief Emergency Manager, Jerome Hauer, whose office was on the 23rd floor of the WTC-7, was also a building collapse specialist, according to a recently uncovered New York Times article. Hauer has attracted speculation from the 9/11 Truth Movement because of his zeal to push the official story in the hours after the attack when details were still sketchy. And by the way, along these lines, remember, BBC reported 25 minutes before Building 7 fell, that 47-story building, that it had fallen perfectly in its own footprint due to structural damage from fires. And then we found out CNN had reported the same thing, but they would never say who reported it. We said, somebody gave you that. Somebody false scripted. Somebody reported early. Because we know firemen and police were saying, get back, they're going to blow it up, we're going to bring it down, we've been ordered to bring it down. They were told that. We're not saying they're involved, they were just told. We have cops on tape saying it, and emergency managers who saw it and heard the countdown. And that's all in the film Truth Rising. So, see, we have false scripting there. And then they said it was a conspiracy theory. The head editor of the BBC said no one gave them that information. They just messed up. Well, now they admit it was Reuters gave it to them in an internal link. That's where the media got this information, the mainstream-controlled media. And then the building did fall as they said it would. So that's why this is so important. There's a video in this article. And there's a lot of these other videos where you got these guys in baseball caps and on TV and supposedly people on the street all saying the same scripted lines, like infomercial people. I mean, as the towers are falling, they're on TV and showing up and getting on camera with hundreds of witnesses behind them and saying, oh, I saw the plane come in at incredible speed and a huge fireball. And then we watched the building collapse due to structural damage from the fires. And then you find out that the people working in the building and management were top thermite experts in explosive thermite, and then the people whitewashing it are top thermite experts for NASA on thermite that's sprayed on like insulation for couplers and rockets. And then you find out, when we've gotten the samples, it is explosive thermite was one of the things used. And then it just goes on and on. But this is just one guy, Jerome Hauer, and it goes on and on with all of them. You've got him, the head of Kroll Consultants, who's the head group, and then they contract with the other security company headed up by Marvin Bush, who was at Building 7 that day. His mother wrote in her own memoir. I mean, you can't make this up, folks. And, folks, the whole building, CIA, FBI, NSA, this guy is Mossad as they get. And I'm not singling out Israel. It's like I'm not saying America's bad because it was involved in the attacks. It's criminal elements. And everybody knows the Israelis, the British, and the U.S. are inseparable. It's the same group. They're all involved. Hauer was also managing director of Kroll Associates, the company that provided security for the WTC complex on 9/11, and he also betrayed advanced knowledge of the anthrax attacks a week before they happened. In July 27th, 1999, New York Times article unearthed by 9/11 blogger entitled, What Good and What Could Go Wrong in His Job to Know. Say that again. What could go wrong? It's his job to know. Hauer is given a glowing write-up by the journalist Randy Kennedy. There is one story he tells in which the fascination is quite literal. But another illustration, a bit more metaphorical, is hard to miss when you walk into his office on the 23rd floor of the 7th World Trade Center, otherwise known as the Bunker, the $13 million bulletproof, hurricane-proof, blackout-proof emergency crisis center opened by the city last month. The article describes Building 7 for what it was, a structural, reinforced, immovable object built for the express purpose of standing strong in a crisis situation. It was meant to be able to handle a nuke a mile away. The whole building was triple built with 3 foundations and 3 separate, it was just... The article described Building 7 for what it was, a structurally reinforced, immovable object. We have links to it. Meanwhile, NIST says it was a flimsy building, totally weak. Of course, they're top thermite experts. They would know. Built for the express purpose of standing strong in a crisis situation, not the weakening tinderbox that allegedly became the first steel building in history to collapse from fire damage alone, according to debunkers like BBC, the History Channel, Popular Mechanics, and others. Indeed, as the New York Times quotes Larry Silverstein as stating in '89, WTC-7 designers built it enough redundancy to allow entire portions or floors to be removed without affecting the building structural integrity, because it was being built for the CIA and FBI. A solid structure that was again improved upon the year with more than 375 tons of steel requiring 12 miles of welding. The article describes Hauer's role as the city's chief managing emergency manager. Mr. Hauer oversees the response to buildings collapse, of which there have been no shortage over the last 3 years. It means the controlled demolition. For much of his professional life, it has been the task of Jerome Hauer, 47, to know a lot about how things work so they can stop. So when they stop working, when they fall down, or when they get blown up, when the freeze or bust or burn out, he knows what to do. Like all self-described emergency junkies, he sits around all day thinking up horrifying ways for things to be destroyed and people to die, and then hoping that all his plans stay on the shelf. But in criminology, they always catch the fire investigator setting fires. They always catch the anti-pedophile cop raping the kids. If you know any criminology, you know this. So where do the globalists get there? But he's a good man. He wasn't involved. We're just talking about stuff here. He's a good man. His mommy, like Chertoff, was one of the founders of Mossad. It's no big deal. The article requires and describes Hauer's role as the city's chief emergency manager. Mr. Hauer oversees the response to building collapses, of which there have been no shortage over the last 3 years. For much of his professional life, it has been the task of Jerome Hauer, 47, to know a lot about how things work, so when they stop working, when they fall down, when they get blown up or blown down, when they freeze or bust or burn out, he knows what to do. Like all self-described emergency junkies, he sits around all day thinking of horrifying ways for things to be destroyed and people to die. Oh, interesting, therefore, that Hauer would have had his office in the middle of a 47-story building that collapsed to its own footprint within 7 seconds in the late afternoon of 9/11, having been hit by minimal debris and suffering limited fire damage. The article emphasizes the emergencies Hauer would have and would list in the resume that he was an expert on helicopter crash, subway fire, water main break, ice storm, heat wave, blackout, building collapse. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, Hauer appeared on CBS News with Dan Rather and intimately set about crafting a surprising alternative explanation for the events that spun a yarn that soon became the official story. Hauer was suspiciously keen to stress that the buildings were not demolished when he was on ABC News by explosives just within minutes of it. And this was not explosives, let me tell you. Demolished by explosives, but by planes that hit them, despite this being a complete reversal of what chief WTC architects and designers concluded during the studies about the impact of planes into the Twin Towers beforehand, saying it was impossible. Hauer also pointed the finger directly to Osama bin Laden as the script began to unfold. My sense is that just the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting the building that burned, that the velocity of the plane certainly had an impact on the structure itself, and that the fact that it burned and you had the intense heat probably weakening the structure of the steel, and that I think it was simply the planes hitting the buildings and collapsing that caused the collapse, Hauer told Rather. It was Dan Rather. He also told ABC similar stuff. On 9/11, Hauer was the managing director of Kroll Associates, a security firm intertwined with the military-industrial complex that was also coincidentally in charge of security for the entire World Trade Center complex on that fateful day. Furthermore, it was Hauer that reportedly advised the White House to begin taking Cipro, an antibiotic which in effect against anthrax, on the very day of 9/11. It was actually September 10th. And 1 week before the first anthrax letter was received. 2 months after, it was weeks and weeks until that happened. 2 weeks 2 months after 9/11, Hauer was part of the Council on Foreign Relations panel, released a document entitled Independent Task Force on America's Responses to Terrorism. That's with Gary Hart, which in part called for the alternative explanations behind 9/11 to be countered. They said that in there. Counter us. Now Hauer's people are out saying, if you say 9/11 is an inside job, you were secretly trained as a child by Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. I mean, folks, it's just crazy. Hauer's almost instant and precise summation of the cause of the building collapse that were completely unprecedented in history, along with the expertise and the characteristics of controlled demolition, in addition to the foreknowledge of the anthrax attack and his position with Kroll Associates, justifiably continue to attract interest amongst researchers in the 9/11 truth movement.